For more on everything that's going down right now, I want to bring in Rebekah Koffler. She's a former Defense Intelligence Agency officer, the author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America, and the managing editor of CutToTheNews.com. Rebekah, great to have you back with us.
Great to be with you, Vince. Thank you for having me.
Just so much happening right now. I was just kind of chuckling to myself a moment ago that it does look like that Donald Trump's remarks about NATO countries failing to meet their obligations is having some effect. The Telegraph reports that NATO countries are now scrambling to meet the 2% spending obligations that they have to be a part of that pact.
Well, imagine that. What a novel concept, right? To pay for your own security. It's right about time, because guess what? Right now, until Donald Trump actually, called for this recently, only 11 out of 31 NATO members were paying 2% for their security, okay, of their GDP towards the collective kitty. And Germany, one of the richest countries in Europe, didn't even pay. Well, if they continue, crowing that Russia is a threat, Putin is a threat, wouldn't it make sense for them to pay for their own security? No?
Yes, 100%. And Biden hasn't been able to achieve that. Biden has been just rolling over and trying to pay full freight. Meanwhile, Trump gets up on a stage in South Carolina and says, you better pay. In fact, that has been his history here, saying that these NATO countries need to increase their spending. When he was president, it worked, didn't it?
Absolutely. Trump did many things when he was president to deter Putin and Russia. In fact, I have another piece that is in the Federalist titled, Trump is the only U.S. president that Putin is afraid of, where I articulate 5 things that Trump did to ensure that Putin does not invade Ukraine.
Yes.
But what I want to tell you is this, the Europeans have decided that it's much better to throw young Ukrainian men into Putin's meat grinder to protect them from Putin. Why do I say that? We briefed NATO. I personally briefed NATO in September 2013 in the run-up to Putin's invasion of Crimea. And we knew everything about Putin's plans, and yet no one lifted a finger, including Joe Biden himself, who was under the Obama, the top point person for Ukraine. I also briefed multiple times Obama's White House, congressional staff, Pentagon leaders. And so the reason why they were so maniacally throwing this weaponry to Ukrainians is to bleed out Russia. But in the process, they've been bleeding out Ukraine because Ukraine is being depopulated. An entire generation of young men, European child-producing age males are now dead. And they're also bleeding out ourselves. Like, we're depleting our own weapons arsenal. And so all of a sudden, everybody is afraid that Trump is going to come in and mess up this status quo that is not in U.S. interest. And of course, let them pay as soon as possible.
Right. Last week, I saw that Vladimir Putin had done an interview, a Russian language interview, and in it, he had indicated that he hopes that Biden becomes president again. Here in the United States, the left was pretending like this was, like a reverse psychology endorsement, like he's endorsing Biden because he's so scared of Biden. What did you interpret out of being a student of Vladimir Putin's behavior? What did you interpret out of that answer? Do you think he was sincere, that he would prefer Biden again?
So, well, first of all, Putin he doesn't really care who is president, but in terms of, and he's almost never sincere, right? But so it's only logical to conclude that Biden, when it comes to Putin, would be better for Russia. Why is that? It's because he's cognitively and mentally impaired, and he has demonstrated that he is corrupt and he can be pushed around into doing certain things, right? For example, remember that in the beginning of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, Biden said very publicly that he will not authorize the deployment of U.S. military into the theater in Ukraine. Why? Because Biden knew that there was no military path for victory for Ukraine, because Russia holds an overwhelming military and economic advantage over Ukraine. This is why Ukraine is on the verge of collapse. And so Biden boxed himself in. And Putin knows that Biden is not acting rationally. He's not acting in the interest of the United States, and he can be manipulated.
Well, the history has definitely demonstrated that, hasn't it? I mean, whether it's Ukraine or China, Biden has been severely compromised by those countries. There's a, the left has, I think a lot of Americans, but the left has been especially animated about the death of a Putin opponent by the name of Alexei Navalny this past week, who was imprisoned in the Arctic of Russia. And died suddenly, and nobody quite knows the circumstances of his death, but he was a young man. He was just he appeared very alive at a court hearing last week, and then within 36 hours, he, according to Russian authorities, is dead. Now, the belief almost everywhere is that Putin had him killed in some capacity, and Donald Trump issued a statement to an effect this morning, the first that has mentioned Alexei Navalny. And the left is very angry about this statement today, Rebekah Koffler. I want to read it to you and then get your response. Donald Trump said this: "The sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what is happening in our country. It is a slow, steady progression with crooked, radical left politicians, prosecutors, and judges leading us down a path to destruction. Open borders, rigged elections, and grossly unfair courtroom decisions are destroying America. We are a nation in decline, a failing nation, MAGA 2024. Just want to get your reaction to sort of the death of Alexei Navalny and then Donald Trump coming in and saying, hey, I'm very worried about some of the parallels I detect here in America.
There are definitely very clear parallels, Vince. Yes, Navalny's death is a tragedy. But what I am concerned about is the life of Donald Trump, our former president. Why? Because the Democrats are using Putin's playbook against Trump. They are going after Trump maniacally, basically just like Putin going after Navalny, who was his top critic and top political opponent. So let's look at what happened with Navalny. Navalny ran an opposition. And so Putin, what he did, he orchestrated, he authorized a hit on Navalny, during which Navalny was poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent called Novichok, which was placed in his underwear, of all places, by the GRU operatives, right? He got sick, he was evacuated to Germany, he was treated, and then he came back to Russia. The minute he landed at the airport, he was grabbed and he was thrown in prison. In prison, he was treated miserably. And so what I see right now is exactly the same that's happening in the United States. The deep state has tried everything against Donald Trump. They tried the Russia collusion hoax that they themselves concocted, didn't work. They tried the impeachment. They are now threatening to charge him with 700, sentence him with 700 years in prison. I mean, Navalny was 47. Donald Trump, if these, people are ever able to succeed, he will definitely die in prison. I mean, this is absolutely frightening. They're taking over, trying to destroy his business. And so what I'm worried about, what's next? Because clearly these people are hell-bent to influence the election. This is exactly what the Russians are doing. And when I was growing up back in the USSR, we didn't have free elections, and it wasn't a thing. And so here they are trying to do the same thing that the Bolsheviks did in Russia, right? They are trying to deprive Americans. Half of the population of Americans are supporting Trump. They're trying to deprive us of the choice to vote for Trump. So what is next? We need to be very, very cognizant of what's going on.
Yes, and you're right to assess that, all of these legal things that the left is throwing at Trump, they're contrivances, they're pretexts, they're invented as a means to debilitate him and to rob him of his ability to either run for office or to afford to run for office. And it seems like there are very few Americans who are willing to admit that out loud right now. I mean, certainly people who support Trump do, but in our ruling class and in our media, they keep acting like this is a very legitimate effort to have some sort of reasonable justice in America. Meanwhile, it is completely out of control. You had a New York judge just unilaterally decide that Donald Trump is going to be billed $400 million in a case that had no victims whatsoever this past week.
And who did that? The Bolsheviks, the Soviet Bolsheviks did that when they took over property of the Russian peasants, the cattle. They took all of their harvest, and they just basically the state made them not only poor, but they couldn't survive. And so what these judges are trying to do is rob Donald Trump of his ability to provide for his own livelihood, right? They're booting him out of New York City, right? I mean, it's insane. But you know what else is a clear evidence that they're going after him because he's Trump? Kathy Hochul just recently appealed to New York businessmen, saying that do not worry about this. This is a very unique one-off case. Like, you should not be worried about their businesses because, of course, the business people are not stupid, and a lot of them are fleeing New York right now. And so she basically admitted that this case is illegitimate, and the only reason, what I call them the American Bolsheviks, Letitia James, and the rest of them are going after Trump is because he's Trump, is because he's going to run in 2024 and he's on track to win. And that's why they are doing it. And that is a frightening prospect.
Yes.
It's incredible that these people try to build democracy in all of these other, countries in the world, Ukraine and the rest of them, but they are destroying democracy inside America. How do you explain that?
Yeah, it all sounds very Soviet to me, and you've laid out why it is that very thing. Rebekah Koffler, thank you very much, as always. Really appreciate your time today.